This cart has 73 unreleased NES games, and I'm going to be checking out each one. I've had my eye on Unreleased Collection Remix 73-in-1 game cartridge for NES console's 72-pin video game card, which, by the way, is a great name. It is yet another bootleg game multi-cart available on AliExpress, but it promises 73 unreleased NES games, at least from the perspective of North America. These kinds of carts are the video game equivalent of off-brand gas station snack chips. You are well aware of the fact that they don't have much nutritional value, but they are cheap and thus can be enjoyed without great expense. Some of the games on here are unfinished prototypes that were never turned into finished games, but were a proof of concept idea in game engine. Some of them are very different earlier versions of NES games that actually did come out. Some of these are Japanese Famicom games that were not published in North America, but were actually finished. And some of these are games that were actually finished or nearly finished, but they didn't make it to actual cartridges and sold in stores, at least during the initial run on the NES. I'm gonna check out each one. Now, on to the games. The first game on here is The Adventures of Dr. Franken. Search and adventure game where you're this Dr. Franken and you're running through a castle, attempting to find parts to try and make a lady come back to life. And there's these monsters. Apparently there was a Game Boy version and a Super Nintendo version, but at the time they actually made a NES version. And this is the first alphabetically, but not really in the terms of quality. What really gets me is it seems like Turbo Jump is already automatically enabled, but you're just walking around the, going through this castle, hunting for bits, and fighting these various little monsters. The next game on here is Airball. You are a dude who's transformed into a ball. I believe this is originally a PC mini computer game. It's one of those games where it's isometric and you have to, like, down actually has you go in a direction, and you're searching around the maze looking for the spell book and other bits, but you can jump. And this was, again, a PC port that was made, but not actually released. But definitely has that two-tone graphics, feels like a British microcomputer. So this is Arcadia VII. It is supposed to be a collection of mini games, and there's Tennis, Xerxes, Gurkha, Twin Cam Turbo, and two more that are actually untitled. It was going to be like one of those budget, oh my god, look at all these games, mini collections, but it didn't actually make it to the market. So this is a game that is actually finished. It is Armadillo. This was originally released for the Nintendo Famicom in Japan. However, a localization of it was started and it didn't actually come out. And I actually have a physical copy of this game, the Japanese one, and it's an amusing physics-based platformer. The rumor is that they were influenced by Sonic the Hedgehog, and they wanted to see if they could do the rolling effects on Famicom, and it is technically impressive. I sort of like what they're doing here is that they're using these small sprites, and it feels a little bit like Kirby in the fact that the sprites are definitely small, but it's high up there in difficulty. But definitely one of the more obscure games. So for this one, I had to put my NES or my retro USB AVS into PAL mode to capture Asterix. Asterix, where there's a version for the NES, the Super Nintendo, and the Game Boy, and they were released in Europe. Apparently, it is based on a well-beloved comic strip about a Gaul, and there's Romans and bears, and I just, defended France from the Romans. So apparently, it's not a bad Euro platformer, but was kept out of the US specifically because of the cultural relevance to the European market. But again, it's not a bad game. Attack Animal Gakuen. So Attack Animal Gakuen is obviously a game that's heavily influenced by Sega's Space Harrier, but it's on the Nintendo Famicom hardware and actually runs at a pretty decent pace, with the graphics being relatively simple. This was, a space kangaroo got me. But instead of being a dude, you are a schoolgirl flying around. And this is also software that was designed for the Famicom 3D system, with the Nintendo 3D system, the 3D glasses. And it takes advantage of it. There's the 3D effect. And it's a very simple game, but I like it a lot. So, Disney's Beauty and the Beast. This is an action platformer game based on the beloved 90s Disney movie. And for some reason, Hudson got the rights to make it, and they only released it in Europe. But I could actually have seen this doing well in America. This is a PAL-only version. So again, you want to actually run it on a PAL-compatible system, which is like a clone system or emulators. I tried running this on a default American NTSC system for NES system, and it didn't run at the correct... actually, not only did it not run at the correct speed, there were like massive graphical glitches. But they could have actually finished the game and made sort of an NTSC drivers for it. But you play the Beast, and I'm going through the castle and beating up animals, which is, I guess the Beast is trying to come to terms with his own rage and personality. Decent animation. Hudson is one of the oldest and best developers, and this only came out in Europe. One of the more famous never-released games, Force Ape. It is a side-scrolling platformer with actually really good character animations. Interesting physics engine. You play sort of this super-powered ape dude who can run and jump around and fight these other human-animal hybrids. But you're pretty fast, pretty small, but has pretty fast scrolling, and made by Seta, and nearly finished, but for whatever reason, never actually released. Probably down to Nintendo, of course, you had to basically Nintendo, you had to, third-party developers not only had to get Nintendo's approval, but they had to pony up the money to manufacture cartridges. And it was a rather expensive process, and Nintendo made the same amount of money whether the third-party games sold or not. The third-party developers had to take all the financial risks, and in doing so, they had to literally bet the company, the future of the company, on games selling. Yes, you can do wrestling moves. But Force Ape, a prototype, has been out there for a while and is a pretty decent platform game. Blockout is a port of an arcade puzzle game and made by Technos and California Dreams, and it wasn't actually published. I guess a rudimentary block drop game. Let's see, so I can move it around to the grid. Don't know how to drop it faster. Okay, so they are transparent, but as soon as it touches down, let's see if I can figure out how to drop it faster. Select doesn't do it. This game came out, and there are 2 prototypes that have turned up at Goodwill, of all places. Often some of these games are preserved because prototypes of them were burned to boards and were sent out early versions to game journalists at the time, actual physically mailed, and some of them kept them around. And luckily, that's how we actually have some prototypes. There were some recent games, such as Super Sushi Pinball, some old games that were never published, but they were literally discovered in some old game journalist's basement. Finishing off the first page is Buzz and Waldog. So this is originally an unlicensed game in Korea called Coco Adventure. A release was planned. It's going to be called Buzz and Waldog. Unlike Super Mario, I don't really know how to... so there's a B button you can... okay, so it's a Korean-based design. So you're a Korean dude who's obviously in a taekwondo, and I guess I can do a little hurricane kick, so that's cool. A little bit like Alex Kidd in that you have to actually get some momentum to jump to the highest level. And I'll definitely have to check it out. Buzz and Waldog. The California Raisins were a clay animated sales campaign for raisin growers, actually. And they were a really, really big deal in the 1980s. And Capcom actually commissioned a licensed game, a action platformer based on the California Raisins licensee, and they actually made a near finished game, and for some reason it was not actually published, probably due to Nintendo's the cost of manufacturing cartridges, and based on the decline of the popularity of the California Raisins as a brand. But that's too bad, because it's actually a, pretty okay game. Chase HQ. So initially, this game started off as a personal computer game, and Taito made a version of it called Taito Chase HQ that was released on the Famicom, the Game Boy, Master System, TurboGrafx 16, and Game Gear. However, for some reason, this did not come out to the US. That's too bad, because the whole idea of chasing down criminals in a car in a driving game, I would have totally loved this. But you play some in typical 1980s fashion. You play some cops in a high-powered car, and the job is to just hit the turbo speed there, to catch up with bad guys, run them off the road, and bring them in. Yeah, what gets me about the tumbleweeds on the road is that it wouldn't actually damage the car. All right, so I stopped the bad guy. Nice. Chesterfield. So, Chesterfield and Koshin no Chosen is an action-adventure game developed by Vic Tokai, released in Japan in 1987. And some might think that it looks like Adventures of Link. It actually predates the Adventures of Link by about 6 months. But there were other side-scrolling action-adventure games at the time. So believe it or not, Legend of Zelda 2, The Adventures of Link, was a very influential game and influenced a whole bunch of side-scrolling action RPGs that were all the rage in the mid-80s. I could have seen this being released in the US, and it's a shame that this game was finished but left in Japan. On here is a near-finished build of Chip's Challenge, the Atari Lynx puzzler, which then became a later Windows game. And apparently it was going to be published by Bulletproof Software, but did not make it out of development. Let's see. So apparently I collect colored keys. Let's see. I actually know very little about the Atari Lynx. I don't actually have one. I can play Atari Lynx on my Atari Lynx on my Analog Pocket. So there's while I do know quite a lot about Japanese games, I'm sad to say that there's a lot of American console games made in the 1980s that I am not familiar with. Ooh, I should have pushed them both together. Cosmic Epsilon. So this is an action game published by Asmik Ace Entertainment in Japan. Resembles Space Harrier. And for some reason, this did not come out in the US. One of the Nintendo 3D system games. I'll have to check it out when I finally make my video on the Nintendo 3D system. But Cosmic Epsilon, not to be confused with Attack Animal Gakuen, which I also previously talked about on this very same video. So this is a Konami puzzle game that was released in Europe, but apparently not in North America, and it's a crying shame. It's sort of based on, let's just say, Breakout, which is based on Pong and other things. Might say, oh, this is based on Arkanoid. Breakout actually predated Arkanoid. But I really like the Konami graphic effect. Ooh, I got a ball slowdown. The Konami's use of blacks in their sprite work is just wonderful. Crash and the Boys. So what gets me is Crash and the Boys Street Challenge was actually released in the US. Bikuri Neketsu Shin Kroku Harukaru Kin Medal. The astonishing new records of Neketsu Distant Gold Medal. I am the dude in the foreground. So apparently to jump, you need to hit both buttons. But can't stop Kunio-kun/Crash. Crash and the Boys. Feel free to make your own Scott Pilgrim reference. I just did. Crossfire. So this is a side-scrolling run-a-gun reminiscent of Contra. You play Eric, who fights all over the world fighting for freedom, or at least American State Department policy. Of course, they fly me in here to fight the communists, I guess, barehanded. I'm actually recording this on the 4th of July, so that's appropriate. Ooh, got baddies in the background. This is actually a little similar to Russian Attack, in that they literally send you in there without a gun. Guess you just have to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. But a Capcom or a Konami-style action game. Yet another awesome Famicom-only release. Cyberball. So this game actually was released in the US on Cartridge, originally developed by Atari, and the NES version was going to be published by Jaleco, and so apparently this is a prototype build. I haven't really played the game on the NES, so I can't necessarily tell what's the difference between this and the version that was actually published, but I'm glad that it's out there. Ooh, I am not good. This is Dracs Night Out, one of those games that was finished but not released. So it's a American-developed platform game. You play as Dracula. And one of the interesting things about this game is it was supposed to be sponsored by Reebok's Pump. Oh, there they are. So, the dude got Dracula before I was able to get the Reebok Pump shoes. See if I can get the shoe before the lady. Oh no, the lady is the babushka. The babushka lady is toxic. See if I can get to the shoe. Dragon Wars. So this is a fantasy role-playing game developed in, believe it or not, an American-developed game that was made by Interplay and distributed by Activision. Dreamworld Pogie. Originally developed by the Oliver twins, so it is a quintessential Euro platformer. But was actually finally released on the US after 2 decades after being developed. I'm guessing that is Pogie. You run around, you jump, you collect stuff. Not the worst platformer that I played, not the best. But, you know, there are worse games that were actually published. Ooh, that's a pretty neat little overlay effect. Dropzone. This is a horizontally scrolling shooter made by Atari 8-bit computers, ported to Commodore 64, Game Boy, Game Gear, and Game Boy Color. However, not published in the US. However, it did get published. Ooh, that's pretty cool. Gameplay similar to Defender. Apparently the programmer, the developer of this game, US Gold, actually claimed that it wasn't selling. He was able to prove that it was, and finally got his royalty checks and used his royalty from this game to buy a Ferrari, which is pretty cool. So this did come out in Europe. I had to set my system to European mode so that it would display correctly. Ah, yes, Earthbound. So this originally was released in Japan as Mother. It was a weird satirical role-playing game developed and published by Nintendo. And a translation of this was actually developed by Nintendo of America and scheduled for release. However, they decided to shelve the NES game and focus on the release of the Super Nintendo. One of the problems about American gamers is that we tend to forget about existing hardware when a new system comes out, and it's our fault because this is actually one of the most beloved role-playing games of all time, and we didn't get the... I mean, Earthbound is well beloved in the US, eventually, but we missed out on the first game in the series, Earthbound Zero, also known as Mother, and it's a crying shame. Escape from Atlantis by Color Dreams. So Color Dreams was an unlicensed game developer. Oh man. Some of their games were quite good, and some of the games were definitely not. I'll give it to you to figure out what I think this one is. Okay, I'm trying to dodge the exploding volcano. Oh, now I'm in the underworld. Apparently I couldn't quite get that. I'm not really... Okay, across. Interesting that they're mixing up their theologies there, because I don't think that the cross is at some Christian iconography. And I'm being chased by the Grim Reaper. Exerion. So this is a top-down shooter for the Famicom with a pseudo 3D effect. Did get released in Japan. Definitely feels like an early Famicom game. Some pseudo 3D backgrounds. Taito was thinking about publishing it. I don't think they had that sound effect. That sound effect sounds an awful lot like Galaga. Yeah, I'm not sure this is their let's just call it sampling sound effects from other games. Exploding Fist, which is, by the way, a great name. So this is a Famicom game that was, or an NES game developed by Beam Software, originally made for the C64. Nice. Not one of the... Yes! Come on, get up so I can beat you up again. Yeah. Fear does not exist in this dojo. Strike hard, strike fast, Cobra Kai. Pain does not exist in this dojo. All right, I'm gonna have to be playing this after this video, but this is Exploding Fist. I think it's a crying shame that we didn't get this when there are so many worse games. Ooh, roundhouse to the head. So, Exploding Fist, not bad. Final Fantasy II. There were actually 3 Final Fantasy games published by Square and released on the Famicom, and only the first game was actually brought out to the US. And so our Final Fantasy II was actually Final Fantasy IV. Our Final Fantasy III was actually Final Fantasy VI. But there are some really great 2D role-playing games that stayed in Japan, and this is definitely one of them. So if you like 8-bit role-playing games, definitely check out the Final Fantasy games that we didn't get officially. So this was finally released on Game Boy Advance and PlayStation 1, but the actual 8-bit graphics and 8-bit feel for it, we didn't get. So Final Fantasy II. Strangely, Final Fantasy III, the sequel, is not on here. Okay, Freefall. I don't really know what's going on. Why are these guys jumping? Like, what's my hand? Why are these little guys jump? Oh, I was finally able... Okay, I gotta hold B to catch one. But this is Freefall. Apparently, there's also a version of it out there called Fishfall. And I tell you, man, the 1980s were a really weird time when it comes to video games. All right, Funhouse. So this is actually based on a children's TV show, children's game show. I think it might have been on Nickelodeon. I guess they sort of became like Japanese style, like the Nickelodeon TV shows are a little bit similar to the weird, wacky Japanese game shows where you're likely to get covered in slime and whatnot. You gotta skate fast. Okay, I was on roller skates. But apparently there was a PC version that was very different. Apparently this is going to be a cash-in game on the success of a... Okay, I do have to throw the... Okay. The Nickelodeon show. Goal 2. It was released in the US. However, I guess this is an early translation build of a Japanese developed soccer game. That's right, I said soccer. It's the 4th of July right now, and so I'm even though, you know, I'll say that American football really should be, oh man. American football should be called hand egg, and the game of soccer actually deserves to be called football because you actually do play it with your feet. But if I was a European, I would find this game very interesting. I mean, I guess Jalico did make bases loaded, and so they, by the Lord, they really kept beating the sports game horse. Hammerin Harry. So, originally made by Ireme, and this game was only released on the NES in Europe, and it's a crying shame. We did finally get it years later. I did get the retro bit release. One of my actually first videos that I actually made. I really like Hammerin Harry. And I stand by my thesis that, you know, what seemed as old-fashioned back in the time is now just charming. So the 8-bit simplicity is what they thought was not that cutting edge in the time. Now is just wonderful and nostalgic, and quite literally, they don't make them like this anymore. Saying that, I just want to let you know to get off my lawn. Also, like, comment, and subscribe. and let's get busy. So, Happily Ever After is a tie-in game that was from an animated movie that was not made by Disney. It was actually made by Filmation. It actually greatly underperformed, and so the NES release of the tie-in game was canceled. But this was finished and actually previewed in Nintendo Power. Happy Camper. It's an action-adventure game. Oh, shoot. Let's see. Definitely a Western-developed game. I guess there's a monster in a... Okay. Don't really know what I'm throwing here. Okay, skunks and other stuff. Nope, can't walk down there. So, don't exactly know... Ooh, oh man, it just freaking ate me. So it says it's an action-adventure game coded by John Valesh. Started as something that would poke fun of environmentalists and camping scene and turned into a shooter-type game where you fight space aliens. Okay. Hero Quest. So it's originally an Amiga game of a board game of the same name. And there's a European version, which is nearly finished, and an incomplete US version, which is nowhere near finished. Okay, so I guess it's sort of, let's see, how can I move? So you got a cursor. So it looks like a point-and-click adventure with a big old chonky cursor. I guess I'm a barbarian dude in a loincloth. So here is the nowhere near finished American version. I guess this is what, Diablo did start. It wasn't the first game to have an isometric perspective. See, they're arranging the icons a bit different, but this is the American version of Hero Quest. Hit the Ice. This is a hockey game made by Taito. Normally, hockey games do pretty well. Ooh, this has a nice cartoon edge to it. I believe this was actually released for the Famicom, and the Game Boy and Super Nintendo version did come out. However, the Famicom version only came out in Japan and did not come out in the US. But that is charming. Look at that 8-bit sprite work. I guess it's more like a 2-on-2 hockey. You know what? Compared to Nintendo Hockey, which is actually one of the best sports games out there, it's a shame we didn't get this, because I could have seen this game doing quite well. So hit the ice. I like it. Holy Diver. So, this is a Famicom action game that was released. I actually have the retro bit release as well as a bootleg version. It is a heavy metal inspired awesome action game that definitely is inspired by Castlevania, but has played these metal lords off to fight the forces of evil with some total 1980s heavy metal references. But Holy Diver is one of the first games that really sort of caught on as unreleased holy gems or hidden gems, and really good Famicom games that we didn't get in the West. So at the start of emulation, people were paying attention to Holy Diver, and those that were in the know were trying to collect Famicom games of Holy Diver. One of those great games that, boy, I wish I got a copy of back before the got popular with the retro game nerds such as myself. But definitely check out Holy Diver. I'm a fan. Huge Insect. So apparently this game was an independent game that was, or independent meaning unlicensed NES game from 1993 that actually did not get official release until 2001, where it was actually released on a very, very small print run. And it's obviously a Galaga-inspired shooter. Definitely arcade themed. Ooh, they have two different levels of, I don't know what that little red dude is doing. But here you go, huge insect. Kitty's Catch. So it's a fishing action game where you play one of two cats. Probably one of the, I think this is one of those games like they didn't actually have a, this is one of those games that you have to actually play against someone. Not the most in-depth game, but not the worst game I've played. Our 41st game in this video is Legend of Robin Hood. I believe this game actually was released, but this is an early prototype build. I think this might be related to the Kevin Costner movie of the 90s. Not 100% certain what's going on, but you think that since Robin Hood lives in the forest, you think he'd be a little bit more down with the local animals. Makai Island. So, apparently Capcom made Pirate Ship Higemaru, and this is inspired, this is actually a follow-up game to Pirate Ship Higemaru, which was only left in Japan with a Famicom version. And this was going to be, this is I guess a prototype of a finished Famicom game where they were going to make a localization attempt. Collect 3 stone plates to find Bido's treasure. Okay. Mickey Mouse Dream Balloon by Kemco, 1992. So one thing that's interesting is that the licensing rights for certain characters varied between regions. So while Capcom had the rights to make Mickey Mouse games in the West, Kemco had the rights to make one, and there actually were 3 different game series, or 3 different games made starring Mickey Mouse. However, they wanted to bring the game out over here, but they didn't have the rights to Mickey Mouse, so this game actually became Kid Clown. I definitely approve of how Mickey is roughly 2 sprites tall. I think that's just a great aspect ratio for Famicom graphics. Okay, I'm fighting a certain hedgehog who's obviously not Sonic, but if this was released in 1992, I believe Sonic was already out, so I hope I get that fast hedgehog. Mike Tyson's Intergalactic Power Punch. So apparently, Nintendo didn't continue with the Mike Tyson license, and so this other company went and picked it up and made a fighting game, a boxing game, where starring Mike Tyson fighting various intergalactic alien boxers. And then they decided to not go with the Mike Tyson license. Our Power Punch 2 was released, but had a character that looked quite a lot like Mike Tyson, but was legally distinct. So unfortunately, Mr. Tyson did not get a paycheck from this. Or maybe he got, not as much as he would have had this actually been released. I see where they were going for Punch-Out, but it doesn't have quite the same rhythm that Punch-Out does, but here's a prototype build of Mike Tyson's Intergalactic Power Punch. Mini Putt. So apparently, this is a miniature golf game that I actually have on Famicom, and it was released in Japan. However, a American version or a Western version did not get released, which is terrible because it was pretty cute. I mess up my shot there. Actually, come on. Ah, not bad. Not bad at all. Okay. I'll tap this one in. Nice. I'm gonna go slightly off center and go for a power shot. Come on. No, no, no. Up the hill. Shoot. Moon Crystal. So the games are sorted on here are alphabetical. And the quality of the games definitely improves towards the end on this cartridge. Moon Crystal is action-adventure platformer. Was released. I have a for the Famicom, and I have a fan translation. And it has really amazing, really good animation for the Famicom. And I still think that it is a crying shame that Americans tend to move on to newer hardware. And in doing so, we missed out on a lot of great later Famicom releases. Ooh. Like that you can actually hang off there. Like I was saying, Moon Crystal is regarded as one of the better action-adventure platform games that we did not get in the West, and it's a crying shame. NES Play Action Football. So we did get this game in the West. Apparently this is a prototype game. I believe this was designed to sell I remember this being a big deal with the 4-score controller, but is well regarded as a pretty decent game of American hand-egg football. Pretty interesting little cartoon graphics. It's got some digital speech. I am not good with sports game strategy. Did I get it? Or was that oh shoot, that was an interception. New Ghostbusters 2. So this is an NES game, obviously based on the sequel to Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters 2. And it was actually developed by HAL Laboratories and regarded as, so it got released in Japan and it got released in Europe. However, due to licensing constraints by Activision, they were not able to release this in the US, and that's a crying shame. So, again, this is a really interesting action-adventure game starring the Ghostbusters, made by the same studio that brought you Kirby's Adventure. But for some reason, we didn't get... Well, there's a reason. It's due to licensing rights, because Activision had them and wouldn't co-license them to HAL Laboratories to release this game in the US. But Shin Ghostbusters 2, or New Ghostbusters 2, one of the more expensive Famicom games, because it appeals to Western game nerds, and is actually pretty good. Here I'm shooting them with a proton pack, and then your partner goes and sucks them up in the ghost trap. I'm glad I finally have a copy of this game, and I'm definitely going to be playing it in the future. Noah's Ark. This is a strange game. It's a platform game starring Noah, who has to run around and collect all the animals and try and get them before the flood. It's published, developed not by Konami, but published by Konami, and was actually released in Europe. What is interesting is a lot of unreleased NES games. They're trying to go for the religious game market. They're trying to say, oh, we're you know, these are Bible stories, so you should buy our unlicensed NES game, and your kids will play them and not be corrupted. However, Nintendo, one of their licensing problems, or one of their licensing issues, is they would not allow for real-world religious iconography, and of which Noah's Ark definitely qualifies. And that was a hard rule that they actually had in affecting American games, and so often references to Christianity, in this case Judaism, were taken out. However, this actually was an official release, and it was actually released in Europe. So Noah's Ark for NES, published by Konami of all people. All right, Pescatore, or Pescatore. Don't exactly know how it's pronounced, but this is a color matching puzzle game. Was going to be published by Sunsoft. I've heard it's often described as a Puyo Puyo clone. I don't exactly know how the, obviously you're trying to match the colors, and you're trying to make the octopi disappear. So you play, you're trying to arrange these octopi in patterns to try and get them to disappear. Not 100% certain how to do this, but an interesting demo of a puzzle game. Pescatore, or Pescatore, was going to be published by Sunsoft. Pokeblock. So, people were trying to get in on that that Tetris money. Is it a falling block puzzle game? Looks like a falling block puzzle game. Not exactly certain how to get them to drop. Well, I know how to drop. You hit A, but my point is like I don't really know exactly how the game mechanic works. Probably has to do with score. But Pokeblock, obviously this predates Pokemon, and I'm sure that people are having Poke, the fish, and rice dish, but in Hawaii, but not out here in the West, because I definitely didn't learn about Poke until later on. But here is Pokeblock. Okay, Pro Sports Hockey, made by Jalico, and they actually got the licensing rights to the real teams and the real players. I think they had the licensing rights of the Players League, and these are actual real players. Actually moves pretty fast. Graphics look pretty decent for a hockey game. Did I commit a penalty? So this actually was released in Japan as USA Ice Hockey. And again, this was officially licensed by the National Hockey League Players Association. And a finished box was put together. But this game was ultimately not released in the US, which is really sort of surprising because it sort of almost seems completely made for the US market, or more specifically, the Canadian market. It's not a stereotype. It's actually true. They do like their, okay, so certain games, different regions have certain games that they consider to be killer apps. So you have definitely soccer game or World Cup games more popular in Europe. But for Canadian gamers, yeah, they're going to be down with Blades of Steel, Nintendo Ice Hockey, and I suspect that if they would have gotten their hands on this one, by Lord, they would have liked it. So, raise a Tim Hortons to pour one out for Pro Sports Hockey, which unfortunately stayed in Japan. Robert Byrnes Pool Challenge, the most realistic 8-bit pool simulator ever. So I have no idea who Robert Byrnes was. I assume he is a professional pool player. Oh, was there a little bit of slowdown when the balls broke? So I guess there's a missed shot, one shot penalty. There is a Side Pocket and various other pool games. I have no idea who Robert Byrnes is. I'd love to see David Byrnes pool challenge with David Byrnes of the Talking Heads. That is pretty aggressive music for what's supposed to be a pretty chill game. But Robert Byrnes pool challenge. So, RoboCop versus Terminator. So there was a comic book called RoboCop versus Terminator, which is sort of a mashup, or RoboCop fighting Terminators going back in time to try, or people trying to stop RoboCop from, I guess, becoming Skynet. But there were 16-bit versions, and that actually were released. Oh man, I guess I got to hold up and jump and grab that. But this is a... Let's see if I can go down there and hold up. Yes! Action-adventure game starring RoboCop. Nearly finished. Sadly, we did not get the 8-bit version of it, but this is charming. It's also funny to see RoboCop jump, considering he probably weighs a ton, but then again, movies and video games. Pretty decent animation. I also like it when game developers will make the characters smaller and then do more with smaller graphics. Scarabaeus. So apparently there is a Game Boy puzzle game called Pyramids of Ra. So I don't exactly know, but it's more of a puzzle game where I think we're trying to navigate around to try and clear the tiles. Oh, there I did. I did it. So I guess you're trying these tiles disappear when you roll your ball over them. Prototype version to try and get on NES, but it didn't really go anywhere. Secret Ties. So this is an unreleased game that was originally a translation of a game based on the Japanese manga Master Thief Sugar by Takao Saito of the Golgo 13 fame, which is one of the reasons why he has that interesting sideburns and whatnot. But this was an advanced game about, or a late stage prototype of an unreleased game, a action platformer game based on a licensed comic of a super spy. Ouch, don't really know. Okay, I can climb. Come on. But not only did this game not get released in the US, it didn't get released in Japan. Pretty decent looking background art. Solomon's Key 2. So this is a puzzle game made by Tecmo. It did... Oh, that's a poor translation right there. Beginnings. It did get released in the US as Fire and Ice. I guess you can sort of create and destroy blocks of ice from existence. And I can't make the last one to beat that last little one, so I guess I have to drop another one. But Solomon's Key 2. This is a early translated version based on the original Famicom game, but eventually came out to the US as Fire and Ice. Spy vs. Spy: The Island Caper. So in Spy vs. Spy, you play one of the two titular spies as they walk around and set traps for the other and try to kill each other. The original was one of the more interesting split-screen action sort of devious games. I fell into my own trap. Based on the characters from Mad Magazine, I believe. Squashed. So, apparently, Ninja Jajimaru-kun is a game series. I have several of them. And this is not the first one, but one of the later ones where you actually play a ninja who does international or intergalactic travels. And so here I'm a ninja who's fighting aliens. They made a prototype translation build. Instead of calling it Ninja Jimaru-kun, they were going to call it Squashed. And this game did not officially see release in the US until the Ninja Jajimaru Retro Collection. Oh, maybe I was reading. Maybe I should actually pay attention. It did officially eventually see a Western release as part of Ninja Jajimaru Retro Collection in 2023. But this is the early translation of the Famicom game, Ninja Jajimaru Ginga Daikakusen. That was going to be released as... Let's see, I think I have to get speed. There we go. You can charge up, you're running, and then jump. Is that the Moon Men? That Doug Jones? Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. So this is an unreleased prototype. Apparently it's inconsistent with many of the plots and character elements from the finished film. One of the, let's just say, more questionable releases, it was tied to, I guess it was hindered by the writing strike. They tried to get it out. And William Shatner's only movie developed. Okay, so apparently here I'm Kirk on the planet, fighting the forces of Cybok. But I find it fascinating that people made, they'd go out of their way to actually commission games. Hopefully the programmers get paid for them, the game developers got paid for them, but then ultimately chose that it wasn't worth it to release it. And considering some games, the quality of some games, licensed games that actually did get released, it's rather funny to see ones that actually didn't get published, such as Star Trek V. Sunman. So, Sunsoft originally had the licensing to make games based on Batman. And they obviously, at some part, they were trying to get the licensing rights to make games based on Superman. And Sunman was definitely started development as a Superman game. There's Sunman fighting, I guess, not legally distinct parademons, fighting like Darkseid's parademons. But they actually had the audacity to release it in Europe without the Superman license, calling it Sunman for Sunsoft. But I don't know about you, but that definitely has a Superman vibe. But I guess that actually makes it more awesome. You know, Superman is so phenomenally overpowered. Nice. So I guess it makes sense that he's fighting these superpowered aliens when he himself is a superpowered alien. But we got the really crappy Superman game on the NES, and it's a crying shame that we didn't get Sunman as an actual Superman game. Help! Yeah, that's absolutely based on Superman. Super Pitfall II. So this was going to be a localization of Atlantis no Nazo, Mystery of Atlantis. One of the more questionable Famicom games. An early action-adventure maze action-adventure game with one-hit kills. And it was fully complete, ready for American retail, was submitted by Activision, but ultimately they decided not to publish it, or Nintendo chose not to allow it to be released on their systems. So Atlantis no Nazo is one of those weird games in that Japanese retro game nerds love it, or at least have good memories of it because it sold well and was, I guess, influential. But it's also, let's just call it, a little crappy and difficult. And but they actually did include this game on the Famicom Mini release. And this game was released on the Nintendo Switch online service. So there are some retro game nerds in Japan that have fond memories of Atlantis no Nazo. And we almost got it in the US as Super Pitfall II. But as you can see, it really is early Famicom. So an Enron game that was what was cutting edge in the early 80s was just downright dated by 1989, where this was going to be released. Superman. So apparently this is an early build of Superman, or sorry, Sunman, back when they thought that they would have the Superman license. Oh, that is actually a decent rendition of the Superman music. Yeah. Makes me want to watch the... You know, if you haven't seen the original Superman movie, it's an absolute classic. And all of that done pre-computer graphics, all done with digital effect or analog effects. And Christopher Reeves is awesome. Not quite as polished as Sunman, but you definitely see where they're going. Come on, get out. How can he withstand this space demon? Withstand multiple punches from Superman. The 64th game on here, Taro's Quest. So Jellico was again trying to bring out the Ninja Jamaru-kun games, Jajamaro Ninpo Cho. And this was a Dragon Quest style role-playing game set in, I guess, medieval Japan. Even though I'm fighting a dog here. Video games based on role-playing games were huge deals in Japan. So JRPGs had a huge boom on the Nintendo Famicom. And by Lord, they really tried. They really tried to get Dragon Warrior to be popular here. Really? Am I not able to defeat this dog at the start of the game? So they really tried to sell American kids. Oh, finally. You were defeated? We both beat each other. Okay, maybe this has to happen. Wake up, Taro. Yes, apparently I think I had to do that. No. Continue your journey. Needs save the people. So, it's a Dragon Quest style role-playing game. Actually was released in Japan. And, you know what? This is lovely. Nice. I deal with weapons and armor. Sure. I'm definitely getting the Gambare Goemon Gaiden vibes from this game. But by Lord, everyone was making quite a lot of JRPGs, and it was just sort of a license to print money. But here is Ninja Jajamaru Shinpocho. Was going to be released in mid-90 by Jellico, but was canceled, and they were going to translate it as Taro's Quest. Thomas the Tank Engine. So, Thomas the Tank Engine, there was a version of this game that was released for the Super Nintendo and Genesis, and but an NES version was developed. Let's see, can I arrange? Or they made an NES version, but ultimately it didn't get published. It's funny, I don't really know Thomas the Tank Engine. Can you set all the switches so that Thomas arrives at the station? Make your own joke about the, the ethical dilemma about having people tied to train tracks and whatnot. But since I don't really know Thomas the Tank Engine, I actually do recognize the music from a mashup of, like, I'm tempted to say Old Dirty Bastard, but I don't think. I think it's Biggie. There's a really great audio mashup of Biggie and Thomas the Tank Engine, which is musically phenomenal. Time Diver Eon Man. That is a dope title screen. So, made by Taito, there's some quality game developers. So, made in 1993, never commercially released, but actually pretty closely got a 4-page strategy guide in Nintendo Power. Supposed to be started life as a sequel to Wrath of the Black Manta. But Time Diver Eon... Oh, you jerks. Action platformer, NES games. I'm all about action platform NES games. Crying shame that we didn't get Time Diver Eon Man. But it's on here. I'm definitely going to have to check it out after I'm done making this video. Titan Warriors, originally called Neo Vulgus. So originally it was supposed to be released in 1988, developed by Capcom as a sequel to their very first game, Vulgus. I always like the little trivia that they say, Capcom's first game was Vulgus. I like the use of black on each sprite that Konami and Capcom later... Ooh, I think I missed a power-up there. You play a spaceship trying to shoot down alien forces, vertical shooter, what more do you want? Apparently, maybe they thought it was too simple or too difficult. Tecmo made a game called Radia Senki Redmigen, called Chronicle of the Radio War Dawn Volume, an action RPG that was released in 1991, and a English release was planned at a point, but unfortunately it wasn't released outside of Japan. A prototype was made, but now there's a fan translation of it. Are you the secret hero, or the sacred hero? Is this a real-time? Okay. So, I guess you do have real-time combat, but also commands, so that's cool. Yes, my name is AAA. So you play the blue dude, but apparently you're followed by the yellow dude, Leos, and you can give him commands at the start of each fight. So, Tower of Radia, action role-playing game. I'm getting a little Secret of Mana vibes of it, the way that you have other characters in real-time action. But it's cool. Here I am in 2024, still finding new 8-bit games that I'm not that familiar with for the NES Famicom. So, Tower of Radia. Game number 69 is Trolls in Crazyland. Doki Doki Yuenshi Crazyland Daikusen, thrilling amusement park mission to Crazyland. Originally developed by Kid, and was going to be an actual Famicom game that was going to be released based on the trolls. So I guess I'm a naked troll with wild hair. They were going to... So Doki Doki UNC Crazyland did get released for Famicom. And I guess they were going to reskin it and release it in Europe. I don't know, I really enjoy the sort of late stage NES aesthetics where they have more graphical power with the memory banks. Oh, and I'm not paying attention to jump. The dawn's early light. U-Force Power Games. So the U-Force was a controller that was, I guess, motion sensitive. They try to make them motion sensitive. And these was going to be a game collection released for use with the controller. However, it didn't actually get released because the device itself didn't get, and the game is unplayable without a U-Force controller. However, there's Hose 'em Down, Nuclear Rat Attack, and Rock on Air, and Power Field B-Ball. So if I ever get a U-Force controller, by Lord, I'd love to check this out. So U-Force Power Games for the U-Force. Euphoria the Saga, Sunsoft, 1991. So this is an action roleplay or an action video game developed by Sunsoft. It's actually considered one of the best hidden gems. I say that as I run into the bad guys. Shoot. But is a freaking adorable action platformer game. It's sort of the first in the, let's see, it's a series called Hammerin franchise. Each game in the series is sort of a different genre, but still with the same adorable cartoon characters. There we go. Actual jump on the little guys. But for a great many times, this game was unreleased in the West. I know it just got a release on the Evercade, and I think there might be also a digital release, as well as a sequel. Sunsoft was recently purchased, and a new generation of game developers and game publishers are trying to sort of resurrect the Sunsoft brand. I've been following them on YouTube, and so it's pretty cool to see the original Euphoria game released in Europe, released in Japan, but for some reason we did not get this in the US. Again, I think it's a crying shame that late stage developed NES games, very cool, very technically impressive, but boy, America, we were really hot and heavy for the Super Nintendo, and as a result, we didn't get a lot of really awesomely well-developed late-stage NES games, or when we did get them, they didn't sell often. That's why Little Samson and Mighty Final Fight and DuckTales 2 command such a pretty penny these days. USA Bowling, made by Coconuts Japan. And you think that a game called USA Bowling would have actually gotten released in the US, but lo and behold, USA Bowling, I guess sci-fi bowling in the future, where they use matter transportation instead of the mechanical pins. Ooh, she's good. I am hosed. USA Bowling You think a game called USA Bowling would warrant a release in the US, but sadly, it did not. Come on! The War on Wheels, a canceled roller skating game. It says roller skating, but it's roller derby. So I believe this is actually based on Bank Track Roller Derby, or a unique interpretation of Bank Track Roller Derby. And might be based on some PC games, not 100% certain. But a NES game was developed and unfortunately not released. Of course, these are dudes, and I'm a bit of a roller derby traditionalist, meaning I like women's flat track roller derby. I was actually a part of it for a great many years. I was an announcer and a referee. Yeah, that's absolutely Bank Track Roller Derby, looking at the track up there. Interesting that you can punch each other, because this is not how the game of roller derby is played, by the way. But most people don't know that. But the War on Wheels, here it is. Next week, the best way to play Neo Geo. Don't miss out. My kitty Guy here wanted to let you know that we make awesome videos like this each week. So make sure that you are subscribed so you don't miss them. This is 8-Bit Joystick. Stay awesome. Play retro.
Thank you.